Hey everybody, welcome to 10-minute tips to teach music with Clarissa Custom Music. My name is Kerry Lacey and I'm going to be looking at some online resources that you can use for your junior classes, maybe for your elective classes, and then of course the resources that exist with the New South Wales Education Standards Authority or NESA. Now, the HSC in New South Wales is a course basically designed for year 11 and 12. There's two different courses, there's Music 1 and Music 2. Now, if you're looking for some other oral examples or some other questions, these are great places to go to. In the access area this week, I'm actually going to be providing a document. It'll be a PDF document. This one's a Google Doc with the actual HSC music questions that we've got here. Just forgive me, HSC music questions for the 2016 HSC paper. So there's a link to the exam paper. All of the questions in a brief summary along with a strategy. So I want to kind of go through this document and explain how it sort of works. Some of the resources, when you go to NESA, they actually have a link to the exam paper and they have a link to the marking guidelines. Now what that's about is that you can actually check out what kids were strong in, some of the areas that they made, some of the things they weren't so strong in with the marking guidelines. Here in the Music 2 exam paper, this is the actual boss test paper. You can see that question 1 is crucifixes. So you can actually see that they've got the questions, they've got the actual exam paper. What they haven't got is they haven't got the recordings. So if you're not in New South Wales and say you're in Melbourne or Victoria and you want to use some of these resources, it can be a little bit tricky. You'll notice that some of the resources lack scores because at the time of publication they didn't have access to the original source. So you kind of have to go hunting. Well, I've saved you a little bit of time here by going through the exam paper and finding you links online. For example, the first question, which is identify the compositional devices used in the excerpt, and you have to make specific reference to the score. It's bars 1 to 11, and the exam itself had 3 playings to answer A and B. And they had a playing and then a 30-second pause and then a playing and then a minute and then a playing in 2 minutes. Now, this is just what happened in the exam. Okay, it's actually segment 0 to 55 seconds of Crucifixes by Antonio Lotti. And I managed to have found the score online. So when you jump onto YouTube and you dial it in, it happens to come up with the score. So this is a good thing if you don't have access to scores. YouTube has got some around. I'm hoping that the ones on YouTube have copyright approval because that'll really annoy me if they don't. But this is a version of Cambridge Singers, and I'll just press play because it's just going through. It's directed by John Rutter. And you can see here it's actually got the score. So you could actually listen to that, and it's the first 2 pages in effect. So you could actually listen through to the recording. So you can actually listen to the recording with your students, and you could actually go through and try and answer the question. Another option is you could say to the students, if you have a flipped style classroom, you could actually give them the question itself and you could say to them, see if you can identify the compositional devices in the excerpt and tell them to listen to the first 55 seconds, and the score's there online. So it's perfect for a flipped classroom. It's quite a simple little activity. It's good for years 9 and 10 as well. My strategy would be to ID the time period. So you could give the kids a scaffold from these strategies that I have off to the side. ID the time period. When you listen to it, you probably realise it is Baroque. When you investigate Lotti, you'll find out that he is from that time period. And so you could go through a list of compositional devices for the Baroque period that you have and find 2 or 3 to be safe. You know, you might say to the students, I want you to find 3 compositional devices or 5 compositional devices or whatever. The second question was explain how pitch is used in the excerpt. And it said make specific reference to the score. So again, it's Baroque, so you could look for chord progressions, look at the bass note, teach the students how to do that. specify the tonic and dominant relationships. There could be a modulation, for example, in this one. Melodic devices can be also called upon. You can get the kids to ID bar numbers, so you could direct them to what happens in bar 25, what happens in bar 12, whatever it is. Part C of this question was from 55, which was the second page, so the third page to the end. And what they had to do was explore the composer's use of texture. So again, it's Baroque, so look for entrances and exits. You also could have antiphony, layers, and of course the other thing you could add is imitation. So there's lots of Baroque concepts that you can talk about within this particular work. So that's kind of a bit of a series of strategies. From that, as I said, you could develop a scaffold for years 9 and 10, or even years 7 and 8. Now, I don't know if Lottie is the sort of thing you would do with years 7 and 8, but it may very well be. Now, with the question 2 in the HSC, it's usually got a melodic dictation in it. So if you're looking for melodic dictation ideas, these exam papers are great. Now, not all of the exam papers have the actual dictation noted like I have here. 2016 does, which is great, but not all of them do, because when they're at the time of publishing, they didn't have copyright approval. So you have to respect that. You might be able to find the scores on IMSLP if it's for education, perhaps. But with melodic dictation, I always teach my students the same thing. See if you can get the rhythm in the first 2 playings. Use the guide notes that you've got here to find notes before and after. So, for example, if the melody steps down to here or jumps down to here, maybe it goes to the third to the E. Maybe from this note here, there might be something close. It might be next door, or it might be an octave jump or whatever. So use the guide notes, use the guide rhythms you've got there. ID any patterns or repeat bars. ID the return to notes you already know, like the start note. For example, this might come back to the start note a couple of times, so keep an eye out for that. ID notes that repeat after each other, like, for example, these 2 C's here. Patterns and sequences that you know, like arpeggios or octave leaps. Sometimes a chord progression can help you make an educated guess, too, if you're really floundering. So there's just a couple of tips and tricks for melodic dictation. With the HSC, this one actually goes from, we normally have 6 playings in the exam, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, so a playing and then 10-second pause, a playing and then 30 seconds. Then a playing 1 minute, playing 1 minute, playing 2 minutes, and playing in 2 minutes. So it gives the kids approximately 2, 4, 5, 6, about 6 minutes, 40 seconds to write. And then, of course, there's the playing of the excerpt. So it's a pretty reasonable sort of structure. I find it to be quite a useful structure. I would give more guide notes in this, or I would give the full rhythm for years 9 and 10. If Berlioz is the sort of thing you're doing with 7 and 8, we do, in some schools I've worked at, we have had melodic dictation happening in years 7 and 8 with actual instruments. So that's always a good thing. So if you want to start doing that, these HSC papers have got some ready-made samples for you to go and find, which is good. Question 2B was, how is duration used? Now, in the HSC, they didn't have a score, so they had to do a textograph is one of the recommendations I offer. However, it's really up to you how you teach students to listen. In this case, rhythmic features, it was a romantic period, so cause and effect would be a good one to start looking at, because the question was, how does he use duration to create interest? So duration's used to create something, so cause and effect. In question 3, this is really interesting one. If you're looking at Australian music, Paul Stanhope is an extraordinary Australian composer. There was no score for the first question, but there was a score given for the second part of question 3. And of course, Paul Stanhope is an amazing educator, so he freely offers his recordings on his SoundCloud account. So the link I've put there is from his SoundCloud account. Of course, if you want to study this in more detail, I would highly recommend you getting the work itself. And if you've got a good orchestra, give it a go. It's only 5 minutes long. It's not a very long work, and it's a fantastic piece of music. It really is. So the question was, explore how tone colour is used in this excerpt. Well, tone colour is all about how and used. So when you see the word how or you see the word used, it really requires a cause and effect. Okay, what is making the sounds and what effect has it got? Okay, because it's how is it being used? So what is it and what effect is it creating? So tone colour is obviously the way it's played. Think of things like register, articulation, expressive techniques, instrumental changes like percussion instruments changing or mutes attached to brass. All right, when you listen to this work and you have a look at the score, you'll see the sorts of things that Paul has used in this particular item. And then 332 to the end, so in the recording, 332 to the end are these bars that you will find. And question 3 was analyse how contrast and unity are achieved in the excerpt. Make specific reference to the score. Well, contrast are things that compete. Alrighty, 2 different registers, fast and slow rhythms, 2 different tone colours, mutes versus open sounds, pizzicato versus bow sounds. So contrast is all about things that compete. Alrighty, and unity, things that are the same. Unison rhythms, playing the same lines, harmonic structure, pedal points, anything that requires imitation, anything that requires commonality, anything that unifies. And of course, ID the bar numbers is one of the big things. Now, if you're looking for musicology type structured things, the HSC does offer a wonderful series of questions. In this case, the question was, compare how 2 composers develop their musical ideas. Now that question's a great one, doesn't matter what the time period. Alrighty, in this case, the students had to pick something from their mandatory topic and their additional topic, but you can substitute that for any particular time period you like. So how 2 composers develop their musical ideas? Well, the strategy should be idea, your core material, and how it's developed. Compare means, in the dictionary, to estimate, measure, or note the similarity or dissimilarity between things. So in this case, it's a good thing to go from one work to the other rather than all of the information about one work, then all of the information about another. But it's totally up to you how you handle these particular questions. That's a bit of a snapshot on one of the HSC papers, and that gives you a bit of a strategy. So for those that are listening to the podcast, some of this might not have made terribly much sense, but if you go to the YouTube link that's in the description, then you'll find the YouTube video, which you'll be able to see the actual documents. And if you go to the access area at clarisacustommusic.com.au, that's KLERRISA, you'll be able to find the link to the actual question, the pages in question, and so you'll be able to get your copy, and that will make a lot more sense as well. Okay, folks, until next time, I hope this gives you some great ideas on some different questions that you might be able to ask your students in class when it comes to analysis.